Okay, hello everyone. My name is Coach Jorge Martinez. I am the owner and director for E3 Training Solutions. And I'm just going to do a quick um, check just to make sure that everybody that it's present is being able to listen. So just give me 1 second. So just a few things. If you have opened your screen for the Google Hangout, on the right side, you should have a screen for the group chat. And in there, you can ask any questions that you may want. And as I see those questions, I'll start addressing them. Anytime that you want to ask a question, just feel free. And if there's anything that I haven't covered here, I'm going to have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So that way I'm going to try to make sure that not only the race, nutrition, and pace execution it's covered, but maybe any other questions you may have related to the Sharon race. So anyway, so not to keep you guys too long, let's get started. And as you know, the presentation is going to be focused on nutrition and race execution. How can you set up your pace or your race pace in order for you to have your best sprint triathlon coming up on Sunday? So let me just get these going. And first, we're going to focus on the nutrition portion, and then second, we're going to focus on the pace execution portion. Again, if at any point you have any questions, please just type it on the chat, and then I'll be addressing those as I see those. All right. So when we talk about fueling for endurance sports, in this particular case for triathlons, there are three main sources of fuel that we can utilize in order to fuel our activities. We have carbohydrates, which can be either stored on the muscles as glycogen or on the blood as glucose. Then we have fat that can be stored on the muscles or can also store subcutaneous under the skin. And then finally, we have protein. However, out of these three main sources, protein, though it's another source of fuel, it's only applicable to severe cases of emergency when the other two are severely restricted or diminished. So for an event like a sprint triathlon, or maybe even for like an Ironman, protein may have a little bit of relevance, but not too much. So we're going to focus more on carbohydrates and fat, especially for the event that you guys have on Sunday. So in terms of the first one, we're going to talk about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, we know it on the endurance world as the fueling limiter. And this is because the average person can store roughly around 100 grams of carbohydrates in the liver and another 400 on the muscles. So total around 500 carbohydrates. But if you do training, one of the benefits and adaptations for the training that we do is that we can increase the amount of carbs that we can store in our body, and that can increase roughly to 200 on the liver and then 500, 600 on the muscles, depending how much training you're doing. So we can increase that, and this roughly is going to equate to anywhere between 2,800 to 3,000 calories, more or less. So in an example, if we have a lean triathlete, which may have roughly 45% of the entire body mass as a skeletal muscle, then half of that it's probably going to be on their legs. And if this person weighs around 70 kilograms, which is what, around like 160 pounds, something around there, this person will be able to store between 1,200 and 2,000 calories on the legs. And this is important because we can only store carbohydrates so much we already talked about, but also we can only use the carbs that it's stored on the muscles that are doing the work. So if you're running, well, if you have some carbohydrates stored on the arms, those are not going to be as readily accessible as the ones that are on the legs. So even though we can store roughly around 3,000 calories in terms of carbohydrates, we can only utilize what it's stored near our muscles. And that's why carbohydrates is known as a fuel limiter, because we can only store so much, and once we run out of it, then we can get in trouble. So continuing the example, this athlete, around 70 kilograms, if it's running for a particular distance, let's say running 1 kilometer, on average is going to be burning something around 70 to 80 calories. Thus, if this person was to start a run completely fuel, and let's say is going to go and run a marathon, then if the person wouldn't fuel anymore, then those between 2,000 to 3,000 calories, but only the ones that are stored near the working muscles like the legs, are going to be utilized. So this person would run out of fuel anywhere between around mile 20 to 21, which is kind of like common for those who have done marathons, that most people are hitting the wall or running out of energies around that distance. So the point here is to say that we can only store so much carbohydrates. That's why it's a limiter, and if we don't supplement that while we're exercising, we're going to hit the wall. We never run completely out of carbohydrates, so as soon as we start running low, our mind or our brain starts sending signals through the body saying like, hey, we're running low, we need to slow down, and you start having all these hitting the wall feeling that I'll talk in a second, and you just have to slow down. Otherwise, if we run out of carbohydrates, it means that we're pretty much dead. So we definitely don't want to get to that point. So each athlete has an off-on switch that might engage at a different level. Hence, some people might be able to utilize a little bit more of their carbs tank versus another person. That's why some people might hit the wall sooner than others. This is going to change depending on genetics and your training fitness and all that stuff. But again, the takeaway from all this is that carbohydrates, we can only store so much, and if we don't supplement, at some point, we're going to run out of fuel, and that's not going to be good, because then instead of having an awesome race, you're going to be either slowing down on the bike, or you might even be slowing down on the run. So we need to supplement carbohydrates in order to avoid that. So knowing that carbohydrates is our limitation and we can only store so much, we're going to have to supplement. But what about fat? Fat is another source of fuel. The difference between carbohydrates and fat is that which one we're going to be utilizing depends how fast or not how we're going. The harder that you go, or the faster that you're racing, the more carbohydrates you're going to utilize and less fat, and vice versa. The slower than you go, you're going to rely a little bit more fat and less on carbohydrates. But this change with fitness. People who are fitter are going to, some of the adaptations that are going to happen is that they're going to spare a little bit of their carbohydrates reserves, and they're not going to be utilizing that as much, and they're going to be relying a little bit more on fat. So that's why it's important that if you do good training before a race, you're going to train your body and teach it to rely a little bit more on fat and a little bit on carbohydrates. And that's a good thing, because fat, it's unlike carbohydrates that are known as a limiter, fat is commonly said to be unlimited. And that's because if we were to use the same example of the 70 kilograms athlete, if that athlete would have, let's say, a 10% body fat, which is low, it will have roughly around 7 kilograms of fat. That, if we convert it into calories, is roughly 50,000 calories. That's way more of the 2,000 to 3,000 calories that we can only store in carbohydrates. So if we were to rely only on fat to fuel an activity, we could easily complete back-to-back marathons. We could even run up to 100 miles without needing any other fuel. The problem is that we can't do that. Anytime that we're exercising, we're always using a mix of carbohydrates and fat, and it's not only that we're relying on one or the other. So even when you are going at an easy intensity, you're not pushing your body too hard, and you're favoring utilizing fat for fuel, you still utilizing carbohydrates to some degree. So unless you're supplementing, if you start running low on carbohydrates, you're going to bunk or hit the wall, and you're going to have to slow down. So that's definitely something that we don't want. And what's exactly that hitting the wall or bunking? If you haven't heard it before, this is just a term that we utilize in endurance sports, which is when all of a sudden you're going from feeling energetic and ready to have the best training day or race to all of a sudden feeling, you have no energy at all, you're dizzy, you're hating life, and you just, no matter what you try to do, you're going slower and slower and slower. So physiologically, it refers to the level of glucose in the blood. It gets too low, caused by the glycogen depletion that it's stored on your muscles. So when this happens, then hypoglycemia sets in, which is the liver glycogen, it's depleted, and this is gonna trigger a bunch of different ways your body's gonna feel. But ultimately, what's gonna happen is you're gonna have to reduce your running speed, and you're just going to have to slow down, just simply because different things are occurring in your body. Your brain is detecting this, and it's like, we're running low, we need to be careful, and it's going to force you to slow down, otherwise you can hurt yourself. So it's like a preventing mechanism. But when it happens, you just feel terrible, and it's definitely not a fun thing to go through. Some of the things that you experience when you hit the wall or you bunk, it's in terms of the muscles and the heart, they use glycogen and fat in order to produce energy, but the brain relies only on glucose. This means only on carbohydrates. So when the brain, which only utilizes for energy, notice that it's running low, then sends all these signals through your body, is like, hey, guys, we're running low, we need to do something, otherwise we can hurt ourselves. So when that happens, you just have all these different feelings. When the depletion occurs on the liver, then the result is that the blood glucose concentration is dropping so much that again, we're running low on fuel. So you start feeling lightheaded, you start feeling fatigue, you lose coordination, you might have tunnel vision, you may even vomit, you may have nausea, or you just totally lose interest on trying to continue to exercise. You're just like, I don't care, I'm done, this sucks, I just want to stop. So it's definitely not a fun feeling, and it's something that we want to avoid. So when you bunk, you just stop exercising because the muscles struggle to produce energy as fueling stores are diminished. We never run out of glycogen or carbohydrates, because if that happens, it pretty much means that we're done. When glycogen reduction occurs, the liver is going to struggle to produce this glucose, and what's going to happen is the brain is basically the one that's putting the brakes, saying, we're about to get hurt, we're going to slow down. So out of the different sources of fuel, fat, for most endurance sports, we're going to have enough stored in our body, even if we're very lean and we have a low body fat percentage. And how much we're going to utilize that is going to depend on how much training you have done. So it's important that when you're preparing for a race, obviously you do your training. It's not only that you can complete the race, but one of the things that is going to happen with all the training that you do is that now you're going to teach your body to rely a little bit more on fat and a little bit less on carbohydrates. But still, once you get to the race, you need to make sure that you're supplementing with the proper fuel so you can complete the swim, the bike, and the run at the intensities that you have trained for, and those have the best possible race. So that can be accomplished as we move towards the that can be accomplished on different ways. And when you are approaching a main event, there are different things that you can do to make sure that your body is properly fueled and all the carbo storage is completely top off. So by the time you're starting the race on Sunday morning, you know that you're ready to tackle that. So before the race, there is a something called carbo loading, and this just refers to a physiological way to make sure that all the carbohydrates that you can store in your working muscles, it's top off. Okay. So basically, carbo loading, it's a window in which you can increase your carbohydrate intake 3 to 4 days before a main event, and this is gonna be supplemented when you are starting to do a little bit less training, the typical tapering that we all go through before a race. We start doing a little bit less training, and if you that and supplement it with a good carbo load, you're probably going to get to the race lace with your carbohydrate tank completely top off. So this is doesn't have to be very scientific or anything. Can be very simple to achieve, and basically what you need to do is starting roughly around 3 days before the main event, you can start just consuming a little bit more carbohydrates, and you just continue to do that 2 days before the event and 1 day before the event. In here, I'm putting the actual scientific guidelines. So if you want to do it a little bit more specific, you can convert your weight into kilograms, and then you can multiply that by the suggestions here. 3 days before, 6 to 8 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. 2 days, 8 to 10 grams, and 1 day before, 10 to 12 grams. If you want to make your life easier, and it's actually what I do with my athletes, because it's just so difficult to count calories and count grams of how much you consume. I just tell them is like whatever you're consuming on your regular basis, we tend to be creatures of habit, so we tend to consume roughly similar stuff every week. So as we approach the main event, I tell them we're going to start your carbo load, and 3 days before the event, what I want you to do is consume as you were doing a regular day with your training or not, and just add 1 extra serving of carbohydrates that day. And by carbohydrates, we're meaning food that is carbo dense, something like pasta, bread, rice, fruit, vegetables. Though for vegetables you need to consume a lot more. So anything that is going to be carb dense, you just consume 1 extra serving 3 days before. And a serving, if you were to look at your hand and just make a fist out of your hand, that fist is roughly equates to 1 cup. So to make your life very easy, if you were to add, let's say, 1 bagel to your regular diet 3 days before, just make sure you're consuming a bagel around roughly the size of 1 closed fist of your hand. And boom, you're done. You have your extra serving for that day. Then 2 days before, now you're going to do 2 extra servings, which means 2 close hands, so 2 fists, and that makes it easier. So for that day, let's say you're going to stick with the bagels. So that day you're going to try to consume 2 bagels roughly the size of a fist of your hand, and then you're done. And then 1 day before the event, you can do 3 servings, and keeping it simple, sticking to the bagel example. Now you're going to consume that day 3 bagels. You just want them to be exactly, or roughly, I'm sorry, the size of a closed fit of your hand. So if you do that, you're going to have a very simple strategy to your carbo load. You're not going to be adding too much crazy stuff. You don't need to go crazy with the dinner the day before the event, because if you follow these carbo load general guidelines, you're not going to have to do anything crazy the night before. In fact, you would only need to do a regular dinner like you've done before. Try to stick to something that you have practiced. Try to stay away from too much fiber, too much food that is high on fat content, just because, and then things that can be spicy or that can cause you some GI distress. So try to stick to stuff that you've known, that you have tried before, that this doesn't upset your stomach, and you don't need to do anything different. Okay? So that would be the carbo load, the 3 days leading to the event. Now we move on to what you're going to be consuming on the morning of the event. And if you did your carbo load well, then you made sure that the carbs stored in your working muscles, or the muscles that are going to be doing the work during the race, are completely top off. But now, through the night, your liver utilize some of the carbs stored as glucose, because we already told you that your brain utilize carbohydrates as the main source of fueling. So through the night, you were dreaming, you were probably excited, nervous about the race, whatever. Your brain utilized a lot of that. So the carbs that are stored in your liver are somewhat depleted. And your job the morning of the race is to make sure that that is completely top off. So by the time you get to the race, your muscles and your liver are completely top off with carbohydrates, and you're good to go. Okay? And to do that, it's very simple. You need to consume roughly between 1.5 to 2 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body mass. So you just take your weight in pounds converted to kilograms, and then you just multiply it by these. The example that we have here, it's an athlete weighing 65 kilograms. I think that's something like around 145 pounds plus minus. May need anywhere between 90 to 130 grams of carbohydrates, and you want to consume these at least 3 hours before the race. Why do you want to do it 3 hours before the race? Because that's going to allow for your body to absorb it and utilize it as fuel. So by the time you are towing the line at the swim start, that fuel is going to be readily available at the time that you start exercising. If you don't do it 3 hours before, then it's going to take longer for your body to absorb it, and it might not be readily accessible by the time that you are going to start the race. So for something like a sprint or an Olympic distance, in this case, Sharon is a sprint, you probably don't need to go to the high end. So I would stick to something around 1 to 1.5 grams of carbohydrates times your body weight in kilograms. So just again, take your weight in pounds converted to kilograms, and then multiply it for around 1.5, and that should give you a good idea. To give you an example, for myself, I know that my breakfast before a race, roughly, if I'm going to do something like a sprint and Olympic, I need somewhere in the ballpark of 100 to 110 grams of carbohydrates, which I know now by memory that is roughly a large bagel with some slightly peanut butter in it, and then a glass of apple juice. And that's pretty much my pre-race breakfast. And that gives me roughly around 100 grams of carbohydrates, and then I'm good to go. If you're not sure, first of all, consume something that it's familiar to you. Same thing as with the dinner, because you don't want to upset your stomach before the race. So if you have been practicing in some of your training days consuming, I don't know, oatmeal or cereal or bagels or whatever, try to stick with that. You want to do something that it's carb dense. You want to maybe consume some protein, not too much. You want to keep it low in fat, and you also want to keep the fiber to a minimum. If you consume too much fiber, it might lead to some GI distress or cause you to do a porta potty stop in the middle of the race, and we don't want you to do that. So keep it something that you're familiar. You can use online calculators. Just Google calorie calculator or something like that, and then it will, spit a bunch of results, and you can just enter there roughly how many carbs does a bagel has, and it will give you, I don't know, a medium bagel is going to have anywhere between 60 to 70 grams. So then it's like, well, I usually consume a medium bagel and maybe a banana and maybe a glass of orange juice, and you just determine roughly how much is that, and then you can have an idea. It's like, oh, perfect, that's going to cover me. I just need to make sure that I eat that 3 hours before the race. Okay, so on race day, your window number 1 is going to be your breakfast before the race. Then on during the race, so we already talked about carbohydrates is your fuel limitation. If you don't supplement carbohydrates while you're racing, you're going to risk to be running out of energy and eventually hitting the wall or bunking and feeling very crappy, and we don't want you to go through that. So in order to replenish that while you're training, on your case racing, you need to consume carbohydrates in order to spare what you already have on your body and be able to go a little bit faster or longer. The simple recommendation that we have here for something like a sprint race, which is Sharon on Sunday, it's you need to consume anywhere between 3 to 5 zero point 0.3 to zero point 0.5 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body mass. So again, you take your weight on pounds, you multiply that by 0.3 or 0.5, and that's going to give you roughly an idea of how much you need to consume per hour. So if we were to take, let's say myself, for example, I'm around 150 pounds, and convert that to kilograms, that's 67 kilograms. Now multiply it, let's say, by 0.5. That tells me that I need to consume roughly around 30 to 35 grams of carbohydrates. Okay, I need to consume that per hour. So how long is it going to take me to complete the race? All right, that's something I'm going to talk in a second. But let's say it's going to take me an hour and a half. So I would need to consume at least 30 to 35 grams of carbohydrates on the first hour, and maybe another 15 on the second 30 minutes. Okay, how do you determine that? Very simple. The easiest way to get your carbs while you're racing are through sports products. We have sports drinks like Power Bar Perform, Gatorade, Hammer Gel Heat. There's a lot of brands. We personally happen to like Power Bar. On one hand, they sponsor us, so that's a disclaimer, but we like their products very much, and a lot of races offer that, so that's why we also like it. There's other ways that you can get it, like through gels. There's Power Bar Gel, there's Goose, there's Hammer Gel. You can get it through Power Bars, Bunk Bars. You can get the Shot Blocks by Cliff. There's so many ways that you can get your carbohydrates. There's not really one better way than another. It really comes down to your personal preference, because some people might like Goose, but they hate Power Bar, or they might like Hammer Gel, but they hate Cliff Bars. So whatever works for you. Hopefully you've been practicing these on some of your training rides, and you have a better idea of what might work for you. It's also a good idea to check what they're offering at the race to see if that's something that you want to use or you have used before and you have no trouble, or if you would like to bring your own stuff. The one thing that I would say is try to keep it as simple as possible. Why? Because the more products that you carry, the more opportunities you may have that you drop it while you're biking, or you forget something, and then you might screw up your nutrition somewhat. So to use again myself as an example, most of the races, except for very long course like Ironman or something like that, I like to stick just with sports drinks and gels. So I know that a Power Bar gel is roughly 27 grams of carbohydrates. So in my example, for a sprint, if I need 30 to 35, a gel, it's almost giving me as much as I need. And if I drink a cup of two of sports drink, whatever they have on the race, I'm pretty much going to be 30 to 40 grams of carbohydrates per hour. So that's going to cover me very simple. So for a race like Sharon, if it's going to take me, let's say, 1 hour and a half, I would bring probably 2 gels, and then I would just drink some water during the race. That's another thing important to remember. Anytime that you're consuming carbohydrates, you need to dilute them with water, because otherwise, if you don't do, then the concentration is going to be so much that it's going to take longer for your body to use it. Okay? So carbs matters. Because it's going to allow you just to spare what you already have on your body, and it's going to allow you to go a little bit faster, longer, or both. So make sure to determine your fueling needs and try to use that as your racing plan. I mean, your fueling plan for the race, and see how it works. I already mentioned that you need to dilute your carbs in order to speed up the absorption and also to avoid things like GI distress. And an easy way to do that is with a sweat rate test. At this point, before the race, might be a little too late to get a sweat test done, but it's something that is good for you to know and remember for the future. And I'll give you kind of like a quick fix in order for you to use during the race. But at E3, we do sweat rate test for the bike and for the run. That way, we have a better idea because sometimes you're working more on the bike, on the run than on the bike. And the test is very simple. So basically, you're going to weight yourself nude right before you do a run or a ride, and you save that number. Then you're going to do your run or your ride, and you're going to do it for a particular duration. Usually, it's going to be 45 minutes to an hour. And you're going to try to keep it roughly around the intensity that you expect doing a particular race. That way you can mimic the conditions. And you're going to keep track of anything that you drink while you're doing that activity, if you drink anything. Some people do 1 hour run and they don't drink anything. Some people do. So just try to keep track of whatever you ended up drinking while you're doing the activity. After you finish the activity, you're going to strip yourself down, towel off any extra sweat, and now you're going to weight yourself again nude. And once you get all that, then what you're going to do is you're going to take your body weight before the activity, you're going to subtract your body weight after the activity, and you're going to add any fluids you may have consumed in ounces, and these you're going to just divide it by the total time it took you to do the activity. So the example that we have here is someone who runs 60 minutes, weighed 140 pounds before the run, don't consume anything while doing the test, and then weighs 143 pounds after the run. Therefore, for this particular person, the sweat rate would be roughly 32 ounces. Okay? We already said that if you don't have an opportunity to get this done, we're going to give you a quick fix, and we'll talk about that in a second. After the race, you need to consume some fuel in order to help your body to recover a little bit faster, and this is what's known window number 3. Window number 3, it's pretty simple, same as with the ones before. You're going to take your body weight converted to kilograms, and then you need to consume anywhere between 1 to 2 grams of carbohydrates, and a quarter of that is going to be protein. So usually the guideline I have for my athletes is at least consume 1 gram of carbs per your body weight in kilograms, and then whatever is that number, a fourth of that, consume it of protein. A very simple way to do that is most companies now, they offer, sports companies, they offer recovery drinks, and they have these things considered already. They have these ratios between carbs and protein. So basically what you just need to do is determine roughly how much you need, and in the product, let's say Power Bar Recovery, on the back it will tell you if you use 2 scoops of this powder, it has so much carbs and it has so much protein. So it makes your life very easy, very convenient, especially when you're on the go. So that will allow you to do that. You want to consume that between 30 to 60 minutes after you finish your racing or your training. That way you're going to help your body to recover faster. Okay? So how do we put it all together? All right, carb load, we already talked about. 3 days before the race, very simple. You're going to increase 1 serving of carbs per day. So 3 days before, you're going to consume 1 extra serving, and that serving is just roughly the size of a fist of your hand. Then 2 days before, you're going to consume 2 servings, and then 1 day before, you're going to consume 3 servings. Okay, very simple. Done. You have your carb load done. Window number 1, which is a breakfast before the race, you're going to consume anywhere between 1.5 to 2 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. Convert your weight from pounds to kilograms, multiply by 1.5 to 2 grams, and boom, you're going to get roughly how many carbs you need. If you use any of the online calculators for carbs, it will tell you how much carbs, for instance, a bagel, orange juice, an apple, banana has, and then you can determine based on what you've been doing for your breakfast, how much do you need. Then for window number 2, in your particular case for a sprint like the Sharon, you're going to take your body weight in kilograms, multiply it by 3, 0.3 to 0.5, and that's going to give you roughly how much you need. If let's say you need 30 to 35 grams of carbohydrates, you can just look at any of your favorite sport fueling product, like a gel. On the back, it will tell you how much grams of carbs he has, and then you can determine roughly how many you need to bring per hour. We told you we're going to give you a quick fix for your sweat rate. Most people, it's sweats anywhere between 16 to 24 ounces per hour. Might be a little bit more, might be a little bit less, but something like a sprint, probably if you're consuming anywhere between 16 to 24 ounces per hour, you're going to be good. And to make your life even easier, 24 ounces is roughly the size of what one of those water bottles that we use for the bike. Okay, or 3 of those cups that they tend to give you at races when you're running, they tend to be 3 of those cups equal roughly 24 ounces. So that makes, again, your life easier. So if you were to consume roughly a bottle of water, or let's say Perform or Gatorade or whatever, during the bike, and then during the run you consume 1 or 2 cups, you're probably getting enough of your fluid needs. Then on window number 3, after the race, between 30 to 60 minutes, you're going to consume 1 to 2 grams of carbohydrates and 0.25 grams of protein times your body weight in kilograms. And then done. You have your fueling strategy perfectly determined for the carbo load for the morning of the race, for during the race, and for after the race. And that way, you're going to cover all that you need in terms of fueling. You're going to make sure that you're going to be able to perform at your very best, and you're going to help your body to recover faster after. Now, the thing that you need to consider in addition to fueling, which is kind of like the 4th discipline in triathlon, we do swimming, biking, running, and then we cope it with nutrition. We need to make sure that we pace properly on race day. Because no matter how well you have your fueling, if you go out too fast, no matter if you consume all the carbs that you can, eventually you're going to have to slow down just because your body's not trained to sustain that intensity for so long, and you're going to have to slow down. So to prevent that, in addition to your fueling strategy, you need to have a racing strategy. And to the racing strategy is going to allow you to supplement your fueling, and is going to allow you to have the best possible race. Since we already covered the fueling, we're going to focus on the pacing. To determine your race day's pace, you need just to consider 3 simple things. How were your training sessions, all the different training that you did leading up to the race, you're going to take a look at those. Hopefully you kept a log, a training log, or hopefully you have a bit of a memory of some of those training sessions, and you can review some of that. Also, you're going to consider your training zones based on your current fitness. If you didn't do a test to try to determine your training zones, don't worry, we're going to give you a very simple way to determine that. And then finally, any key sessions or race rehearsals that you may have done. Key sessions is anything that it's things related to your race, kind of like if you did a swim followed by a bike, or you did a bike followed by a brick, a transition run. Those are key sessions that are relevant to the training specific to your race. And race rehearsals are mini race simulations that you may or may have not done, but if you did, they're great to test certain things related to your race, like your pacing or your fueling. Okay? So, training sessions. You're gonna take all your swim, all your bike, and all your run training sessions. Again, if you have a log, this is gonna be very simple. If you don't have, try to just look, think back of some of the training that you have done. Maybe you follow a plan online, and you have some idea of what you did, and then try to pick the ones that were more relevant to the duration and distance for the main event. So for swimming, for the sprint, like the Sharon, try to look at the workouts that were around half a mile, so anywhere between 800 to 1,000 yards, and try to look at least, if you have all of them, that's perfect, but if you want to make your life simple, just look back for the last 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, and then try to get an idea of what you were doing on those specific sessions. For biking, same thing. What's relevant for your event? In this case, for Sharon, anything between 10 to 15 mile rides. Try to look at those sessions and see what was your average speed. If you train with a heart rate monitor, see what was your average heart rate. If you don't train with a heart rate monitor, try to remember what was your perceived exertion for those particular rides. For running, anything that was something around 5, maybe to 10K, anywhere between 3 to 6 miles, it's relevant for you. And try to look what was your average pace for those sessions. If you train with a heart rate, again, what was your heart rate, or what was your perceived exertion if you don't train with a heart rate. Okay, so that's going to give you the first layer of information to try to determine your race pace. Then your training zones to see how you're doing current in terms of your current fitness. So if you did determine your training zones, then it's going to be simple, because you know that when you were doing a particular session, you were doing it at an easy pace or a moderate pace or a hard pace or whatever. If you never got to do some testing, don't worry, because maybe this was your first race and you were just trying to get acquainted with the training and get through it and complete the sessions and whatnot. So don't panic. You can break it down very simple. Try to see the sessions that you did, and most of the time you were training maybe on 3 different levels: easy, moderate, and hard. Easy are most sessions that you did at a pace that you could hold all day, quote unquote. Meaning, if you went out to do a run that it felt so easy that you could have done that pace for a long period of time, that's an easy session. Same with the bike, same for the run. Moderate are sessions that you can do at a pace that you can hold anywhere between 3 to 5 hours. And then a hard session is anything that you do at a pace that you can hold for less than 1 hour. So again, if you just go back to step number 1, you look at some of the training that you did, and you look some of those distances that are relevant to your event on Sunday. You can say, it's like, well, I did a bunch of half-mile swims, and most of them were easy to moderate. Or maybe I did a bunch of hard sessions. On the bike, well, I don't have a heart rate monitor. Maybe I don't, wasn't tracking my perceived exertion. But I know that every time I was riding around 15 to 60 miles per hour, that felt pretty moderate to even hard. So then you can start allocating a little bit of emphasis to these different sessions and their intensity, and just give you an idea. And again, we're trying to look mainly for the last roughly 6 weeks of the training. Then if you consider the simple E3 training zones that we just give you, easy, moderate, and hard, then an easy session is for events that are lasting over 6 hours. A moderate is for events that are anywhere between 5 to 6 hours, up to 5 to 6 hours. And hard is for events that are anywhere between 1 to maybe 2 hours. So because in your case you're going to be doing a sprint, but it might take you more than an hour, but it's going to take you under 2 hours, then probably the intensity that you need to be racing at is going to be anywhere between moderate to hard. And again, this is a little subjective because we don't know exactly what moderate or hard might mean to you, but that's why we want you to look at some of the training that you did before, look at some of the sessions that you did that are relevant to the distance of the race on Sunday, and say, like, oh, when I was doing these 10 milers on the bike, when I was going around 15, 16 miles per hour, that was moderate to hard. So that start giving you an idea of what sort of intensity you need to do on race day. Finally, the key sessions or race rehearsal. Again, key sessions are sessions in which you practice elements of the race, like a swim to bike session or a bike to run session. The race rehearsals are sessions in which you simulated a mini race or did sessions at a particular race pace because you're pursuing a particular PR or something like that. So in terms of the key sessions, we want you to review some of those sessions when you did a swim to bike or a bike to run session, and note how you were feeling on that day, Hopefully, if you have a training load, that's going to make it easier. If not, try to use some of the info that we just gave you, and just try to give it a bit of a score, saying is like, I did that 12 miler on the bike. I did it at a moderate pace, and that day I felt kind of crappy. Another day I did it at a easy to moderate pace, and I actually felt pretty good. And see if you have any notes or anything on your log. If you have a log, you can see if you actually fueled during the race or if you didn't, and then that gives you a little bit extra information. If you don't have anything, any of that, again, don't panic. Just try to pick some of the relevant sessions and then try to see how you were feeling. If you did some race rehearsals, perfect. Those are mini pictures of what you can expect on race day. If your plan or what you were doing training-wise didn't include any race rehearsal, then don't worry about it. How you're going to put it together? Well, take particularly the past 6 weeks swim, bike, run sessions that are similar in duration to your main event, and note what the intensity was. Or if you train with heart rate or perceived exertion, you can use that. If you don't know what sort of intensity was it, use our simple training zones, easy, moderate, and hard, and allocate a bit of a value. Say, when I did these swims, say they were easy, or they were moderate, or they were hard, and then that can give you an idea. It's like most of my half-mile swims were on the easy side. Then that tells you that most of your training was around that intensity. Identify your race distance and what intensity made fit for you. We already tell you for a sprint, in your particular case, is going to be anywhere between moderate to hard. And if you did any key sessions or race rehearsals, also note the intensity, heart rate, perceived exertion, or using our simple training zones, you can determine how intense were those sessions. So an example to put it together is if your average pace for some of your half-mile swims were around 145 minutes per 100 yards, and you feel this was a moderate pace, then just make a note for that. Same for the bike. Any 15 to 20 mile ride that were around 15 miles per hour, you felt this were around a moderate intensity, note that. If your average pace for anywhere between 5 to 10K runs, anywhere between 3 to 6 miles, these were around, let's say, at 8-minute mile, and this felt like a moderate intensity or easy intensity, note that. Then take example of any key sessions or race rehearsal, and let's say if you did some key sessions, a swim to bike or a bike to run, and if the average for some of those were around, let's say, 135 for 100 yards, and this felt more of a hard intensity because you were trying to push it. Maybe for your bike rides between 10 to 15 miles, you average a little bit faster speed, and that felt like a harder intensity. And running, you push a little bit harder, and you were probably around 730s, which felt like a hard intensity. You make a note on that, and then this will help you determine, it's like, well, for a sprint, my pacing should be anywhere between, for my swims, is when I was going easy to moderate, I was around 140s. When I was going moderate to hard, I was around, 145s. When I was going moderate to hard, I was 135s. You can split it in the middle, and you probably need to be swimming somewhere around 140s per 100 yards for the race. This is going to be slightly harder than moderate, but it's not going to be too hard, and this should give you or leave you plenty of energy to then perform well on the bike. For the bike, you take that when you were riding easy, it was around maybe 15 miles per hour. When you were riding hard, it was probably around 17 miles per hour. And this felt that it was somewhere moderate, somewhere hard, or somewhere easy. Then this will give you, if you were to bike around in the middle, 16 miles per hour, it's going to give you an intensity that is moderate or slightly harder than moderate, but it's not going to be hard. So again, this plus the swim that you already did should give you a proper intensity in which you're trying to go as fast as you can without going too hard and then leaving no energy for the run. Finally, for the run, if when you were doing some of your easy runs, you were around 8s, and when you were doing some of your hard runs, you were 730s, then probably for the race, anywhere around 745s minute mile should be a good intensity, because it's going to be slightly harder than moderate, but again, not super hard. And if the race is going to take you anywhere between 1 to 2 hours, this probably is going to get you on the ballpark of the intensity that you need to sustain. This added plus the fueling that we already taught you how to do, it's probably going to yield you the best split, the best proper execution, and thus the best performance. We cannot give you exactly what's going to be your plan because we don't know your training, but if you take into consideration the information that's given here, and it's going to be saved on YouTube as a video. You want to review it later, and I'll send you the PowerPoint so you can have the information. Then you can put together a plan for the race. And if you have any specific questions, please let me know. I'm happy to answer right now. Or if you may have questions later, just shoot me an email between now and Friday, and I'll be happy to get you that information so you can get it covered by Sunday. So let me know. Anybody has any particular questions? No questions, anyone? Come on, there must be one at least. All right. Well, it seems indeed no one has questions. So, again, no worries. If you happen to think a question later on, please feel free to send me an email. You must have my email. If you don't have it, it's Jorge at e3ts.com. And I'll be happy to answer any of those questions. Other than that, I hope the presentation was useful for you. Again, I'll send the presentation when we're done to the email address that you use for the RSVP. I apologize that we have to cancel the clinic last Saturday, but I hope the information provided today will help you get the best possible race on Sunday. And we'll be there. I'll be there at the E3 tent. So please stop by, say hello. If you have questions before the race, I'll be happy to help you out. We might even have some products from our sponsors like Power Bar. So if you're missing anything for your fueling, please feel free to come and we'll help you out. All right. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And you know, again, let us know if you have any questions. Thank you very much.